Wishing you all a super warm welcome to Connecting with Purpose, where we connect with winners and thought leaders from multiple sectors to provide you with a 360-degree view on purpose. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Our purpose, to inspire you to unlock your potential and optimize your performance and impact. Hi. So it's Neil Turner for Purpose Views. Thanks for joining us again on Connecting with Purpose. Mandy Hossami is joining me today. Mandy and I have known each other for a number of years, and Mandy's career has been very distinguished in the fields of investment banking, events, amongst others. And now there's been a recent sort of turn in what Mandy's sort of excited and passionate about, which we want to talk about today, which is that of Agile Leadership. She recently completed at the University College London a Masters in Industrial Organisation and Business Psychology. I hope I got that right, Mandy. And yeah, with a special dissertation on that, which is going to be published by UCL soon. So, you know, you get a little bit of a sneak peek into Mandy's opinions about Agile Leadership. And today we want to talk about that from the perspective of the integration with purpose and purpose-led leadership. So without further ado, we'll get on. Thanks for joining, Mandy.
Thank you for inviting me, Neil.
You're welcome. How you doing?
I'm well, actually. Well, and excited.
Good. Fine. Well, look, thank you very much. And I just kind of wanted to start the day, you know, it will be basic for you, but it'll be very informative for me. If you could please just give us a definition of what is Agile Leadership before we start talking about purpose as well.
Absolutely. So Agile is a term that a lot of organisations have been using over the pandemic, particularly since they find themselves in this strange, kind of volatile, uncertain, chaotic and ambiguous world, often called VUCA. And what they're often talking about is things like working in a different way, working from home, giving their staff laptops if they're in an industry where you can do that. Actually, Agile Leadership, I think, is a bit more than that. And to look at the origins of it, you really have to go back to the 1990s, where software developers decided that the traditional kind of waterfall method of delivering software, in other words, those huge projects that had lots of staff on them and took 5 years to deliver, were usually over budget and often not relevant by the time they were delivered. And they decided to do something a bit more nimble, a bit more agile, which was to create very short spurts, deliverables in a month, involve the client much more, be able to turn on a sixpence, if you like. And this ended up with them creating something called the Agile Manifesto in 2001. And Agile Leadership really stems from that. And translating that into leadership, it speaks of a leader who, first of all, creates an agile environment, an agile culture with these short sprints and customer involvement and so on. But also teams that largely manage themselves, lack of hierarchy, definitely getting rid of the kind of silos that you find in traditional 20th century organizations, because the teams spread across the organization and involve everyone who needs to be involved. Loads of communication, but not the kind of traditional hierarchy. And really leaders who have see as their role setting the roadmap rather than dictating. In other words, they recognize that they may not have all of the answers.
So, I mean, something you mentioned there, which I think is really important to purpose and Agile, as you've just sort of described it, is creating the right culture and environment for it to thrive as a process, if you like, and also that's true of purpose. Without the right environment, and you know, purpose can sometimes get contained, I suppose. So what's your view on how, you know, purpose-driven leadership and that inner culture might help Agile to thrive, so to speak?
Well, I think it's absolutely vital, because having a purpose, and importantly sharing that purpose, is really the why. It's, if you don't have that, I'm not sure that Agile is going to succeed, or indeed any other form of leadership, actually, because it overlays on top of this sense of purpose. So you can imagine a situation where you're trying to empower teams to work themselves. Well, if they don't share the purpose of the organization and of the leadership team, that's never going to work. If you say to them, we know that you don't normally talk to the finance team, but actually, they're a big part of this project. Again, the finance team have got to have that same shared purpose. So it absolutely goes to the heart. And I would go as far as saying that Agile won't work without it.
Yeah, I think, fully agree. You're expecting the Agile approach of self-managed teams, highly motivated people, quick sprints, people taking responsibility, working, quickly in an agile fashion. From the perspective of leadership, they need to also be demonstrating the right behaviors, if you like, and culture for that to happen. So, how do you think purpose can help engender that set of leadership behaviors to allow Agile to, to work properly when you adopt it as a methodology?
Well, I think one of the things that we've discovered in the last couple of decades is that just paying people a lot of money doesn't work. It might work for the very short term. You might get people to contribute a bit extra if you say to them, we'll put a bit extra in your pay packet. But it doesn't, it's not enough. And the leader has really got to instill that sense of purpose and to create an environment where people can talk openly about that sense of purpose and feel that real congruity between what they feel and what the organization feels. We're talking about employee engagement here. I mean, it kind of feels like a slightly old-fashioned term now, but that's really what goes to the heart of it. If people don't show up in an authentic way in their organization, you're only ever going to get a certain amount of input from them. You get an exponential amount when people share the same view, the same sense of purpose, the same direction. And that's the job of the leader. That's absolutely the job of the leader, to embrace that.
Yeah, and I think, the link between engagement to a purpose and performance is pretty clear in this instance. What do you think are some of the other upsides of, leading with purpose when applying an agile approach?
I just think you get more for your money, actually. So if someone is cynical about it, actually there's a lot of evidence that organizations are more successful when they can combine both purpose and also a more modern 21st century style of leadership. So a fantastic example from Pixar, who were quite an early adopter of some innovative methodologies, where famously they had something called a brains trust. And basically, everyone who could contribute to their creative process, including the security guard, was involved. So this is not a question of what your title is in the organization or whether you have the corner office or not. It's about your desire to contribute and be part of something.
But I suppose expanding on that point about how leaders need to show up, you mentioned authenticity, creating the right environment, leading in such a way that you have engagement from everybody on the team. What else do you think are sort of important characteristics, if you like, of agile leaders that purpose driven too?
So personal characteristics, I think one of the most important ones is humility. And that stands in such sharp contrast with the kind of 20th century view of often middle-aged, often male leaders who often had big egos and a sense that they had all of the right answers. Now, I think often that wasn't the case, but that was what we kind of expected of them. We expected that level of authority, and we hired people who showed those traits. I think 21st century leadership really does demand a sense of humility, the understanding that as leader, I may not have all of the answers, but the trust to know that other people around me will, and that they will contribute because they feel it's the right thing to do. So if I had to pick one, that would probably be it. But I think there's lots of other things that the leader needs to do. So communication is absolutely up there as being one of the top things, and not that the traditional kind of, quarterly newsletter from the CEO. I'm talking about authentic, regular communication that might be a 5-minute stand-up, or the the distance Zoom equivalent of that these days. And conversations, again, not by hierarchy, not in the real world when we're all in an office together. It's the idea of having chairs on wheels so that you can actually Zoom across and speak with somebody from another department and get some ideas from them, because lots and lots, all the evidence in the research is that lots of creativity takes place on the edge. In other words, not in research and development departments, but by almost those kind of water cooler moments between people who have big hearts, if you want to call it that, who want to do the right thing.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned a couple of things which we haven't done a lot of in the past couple of years. Water cooler moments, rolling your chair on wheels over to a colleague to have a discussion about something.
But there are some fantastic examples from my research in how organizations have made those things happen at a distance. So one of the people that I interviewed was an architect in a major firm of architects, and they find a lot of their creativity comes from water cooler moments, chairs on wheels. And the organization invested in software that enabled people to work on designs simultaneously. I don't know anything about architecture, but apparently this was not software that was widely available in previous years. And it meant that together with the chat function, it would almost replicate, if you like, a water cooler moment. So where we are in terms of technology means that some of those things we can replicate at a distance.
Yeah, which, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everyone's on all the time, staring into their little 2-inch tile on their monitor, but to keep that creativity up, technology is one. I think purpose is the other, actually.
Yes, it is.
So I mean, thinking about that, when the agile leader needs to create inspiring goals which people can understand and follow and buy into, I think purpose is something which needs to be present for people to have an intrinsic kind of understanding about how we're going to work and what we're going to achieve, right?
And it isn't something that the leader just hands down from the mountain. Ideally, this is something that is much more discursive. And if you think of the leader's role as setting the roadmap, that's just, we want to go from A to Z. How we're going to do that, he or she may not have the right knowledge, understanding, depth to be able to do it. They may just know they want to get there. And they will have teams of people working with them that will be able to fill in all of those gaps, and along the way feel really valued and important and part of the direction of that organization.
Yeah. Can you think of any sort of examples where you have had that purpose-driven agile approach where the two are working simultaneously, and purpose is driving the agile approach to success?
So the research that I did was really interesting at showing that spectrum. And so let me talk about things at either end of that spectrum. So one end of the spectrum, agile is definitely easier in a high-tech type environment. So, it's no accident that it was born out of technology, and it can work really well in technology organizations. They have the language, they have the technology, they have everything else. If they have the purpose, if they have that shared sense of doing and accountability, then it works really well. I think at the other end of the spectrum, there are organizations where, for example, agile in every aspect doesn't work. So here's an example. In education, in schools, some of the really key aspects of agile don't work. You can't work in the way that you want to. One teacher I interviewed said to me, I can't go and have lunch when I want to. I can't even go to the bathroom when I want to because there's a timetable. You can't get past that. There is a curriculum that they have to stick to. They may have a little bit of leeway, but the roadmap is very, very detailed. But even in those environments where there is a proper shared sense of their destiny, and where there is collaboration, respect, and some of these other important features of agile, they get better results than when they don't have it. And then the final example I would give is where things don't work well at all. So I'm thinking about one organization that I interviewed, run by the person who set up the organization, who still holds a lot of the responsibility, definitely dictates how everything is done, and where he pays people a lot of money but gives them absolutely no say in how anything takes place. I don't think they've been very successful at all. Really interesting, actually, that spectrum.
Yeah, how do you relate to Waterfall project management methodology? Which is a much more traditional approach, I suppose, when we're talking about agile on the one hand, and some of the characteristics of the approaches and the organizations that you mentioned there sounded like they had their traditional approach and traditional timetabled way of doing it. What do you think of the upsides of agile in the sort of modern business climate?
Well, I think, as I've just said, not every business can adopt agile by the book. So I've given you one example in education where just in highly regulated environments, you just you don't have the freedom to make every decision. There are other areas where it's potentially problematic. So if you have organizations in the financial sector, listed companies perhaps, where they're subject to heavy board governance, having a complete free-for-all might not work. So you've kind of got to accept that there's kind of an ideal world. But what my research showed is that the more agile you are, the more successful the organization is. So actually, even adopting some of these things is going to put you further ahead. I mean, at the end of the day, shareholder value is still very, very important. People want to understand that whatever you do is going to positively impact the bottom line. But going back to the other part of your question, I'm not sure in the development environment there are many organizations that are still using the traditional waterfall methodologies in software development, just because they've been so badly disproven, so burnt by high profile failures that have got into the press. I do think there are a lot of organizations that I've come across which are heavily siloed, heavily very bureaucratic in the way that they do things, and interestingly, going back to purpose, often don't have any kind of sense of shared purpose. Because what you find is that when you get together a group of people who really share what that vision is going to be and how they should behave in the way they want to get there, things happen.
Yeah.
You don't say, well, I'm not going to go and talk to the finance department. You know, you say, I need to get it done. They have the answer. Why would I not speak to them?
Yeah.
So
quite liberating and also quite galvanizing in terms of giving people confidence, because they know that they've got that shared purpose.
Yes.
and way of working around the challenge.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, if you need to break some of the rules and do things differently, well, to misquote Einstein horribly, do what you always did, get what you always got.
Yeah. Back to the engagement thing, right?
Yes.
And it, you know, take your point, might be an outdated term, so I look forward to the new one when someone comes up with it. Would that be you? Because you said earlier on that you were going to be doing another research qualification into the impact of engagement on the success of Agile. What's your sort of main plan around that?
I wasn't being disrespectful about engagement, because I think actually it's completely at the heart of it. I think as a term, it's been used and abused a lot. And as I said earlier, you know, for lots of not very enlightened leaders, employee engagement is synonymous with paying a bit extra, and doesn't involve all of the sorts of things that you and I have been talking about today. So I'm really interested in the impact of agile leadership on engagement. There hasn't really been any research into that, and that's what I'd like to look at next, in some shape or form. I'm still going to be the oldest student at university, I think, when I do that, but hey, because I think it's fascinating. It's you can't talk about the leadership of an organization, you can't talk about the finances of an organization without carrying everybody along with you. And again, you come back again to purpose, because unless that's shared, nothing's going to happen. You know, nothing long term is going to happen. You might get a quick spark of success, but you're never going to get anything sustainable without that. So yes, I find it fascinating.
Yeah, good. Mandy, thanks for your time. That was
at all
an enlightening conversation. Look forward to the next research report and also reading this one when it's published.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, Neil.
I'll come on next time. All right. Thanks a lot.
Bye.